It began with a sound that should never have been ignored. In the quiet Bavarian countryside of Germany, in the year 1922, a farmer named Andreas Gruber heard footsteps in the snow leading from the forest to his isolated farmhouse, but none leading back. He felt watched. Tools went missing. Strange noises echoed from the attic at night. Yet no one could have imagined that within days, every single person inside that house would be brutally murdered, and that the killer would stay behind, living among their corpses, eating their food, and tending their animals as if nothing had happened. This is not a fictional horror story. This happened in real life. And to this day, the murderer was never caught. The Hinterkaifeck farm sat alone, miles away from the nearest neighbor, surrounded by dense woods and open fields. Andreas Gruber lived there with his wife Kazilia, his widowed daughter Victoria Gabriel, and Victoria's two children, 7-year-old Kazilia and 2-year-old Joseph. Also living with them was Maria Baumgartner, the family's new maid, who had arrived just one day before the murders. The farm had a dark reputation long before the killings. Years earlier, Victoria's husband had died mysteriously during World War I, though rumors spread that he may not have died at all. There were whispers of incest within the family, accusations that Andreas had abused his own daughter, and court records confirming disturbing charges. The house was already haunted by secrets, but something far worse was coming. In the days leading up to the murders, Andreas noticed unsettling signs. A newspaper appeared on the property that no one in the family had purchased. The keys to the house went missing. Footprints in the snow stopped at the farmhouse, but never left. Andreas mentioned hearing footsteps in the attic, but when he searched, he found nothing. Despite all of this, he refused to contact the police. Perhaps he believed he could handle whatever was happening. Perhaps he was already afraid of what he might find. On the night of March 31st, 1922, that fear became reality. Sometime after dusk, one member of the family was lured into the barn. No one knows how. Perhaps by a familiar voice, perhaps by a sound meant to alarm them. Inside the barn, they were struck in the head with a mattock, a farming tool similar to a pickaxe. One by one, Andreas, his wife, and Victoria followed, each meeting the same brutal fate. Their bodies were stacked in the hay, covered partially with straw, as if the killer tried to hide them or perhaps show a twisted form of respect. Inside the house, the murders continued. The maid Maria was killed in her bed. Little 2-year-old Joseph was murdered in his crib. 7-year-old Kazilia, however, did not die immediately. Evidence later showed that she survived the initial attack, tearing out her own hair in agony before finally succumbing to her injuries. The level of brutality shocked even the most hardened investigators. What makes this case truly terrifying is what happened after the murders. The killer did not flee. Neighbors later reported seeing smoke rising from the chimney in the days following the killings. The farm animals were fed. Bread was taken from the kitchen. Someone was living there. When the bodies were finally discovered on April 4th, 4 days later, they were partially decomposed, but signs indicated someone had remained in the house, moving freely among the dead. Imagine the silence of that house at night. The discovery came when neighbors grew concerned that the family had disappeared. A mechanic who came to repair machinery found the bodies in the barn. Police arrived and were immediately overwhelmed. Crowds of villagers trampled through the crime scene, contaminating evidence beyond repair. Autopsies revealed horrifying details, including the possibility that little Kazilia had been alive for hours after the attack. The murder weapon was later found on the property. Yet despite all of this, no clear suspect ever emerged. Over the years, many theories surfaced. Some believe the killer was Carl Gabriel, Victoria's supposedly dead husband, who may have returned from the war and lived secretly in the attic. Others suspected a neighbor with a grudge or a former farmhand seeking revenge. One man, Lorenz Schlittenbauer, who helped discover the bodies, became a prime suspect due to his suspicious behavior, including entering the house alone and allegedly knowing details he should not have known. Yet no evidence was strong enough to lead to an arrest. Every lead collapsed. Every suspect walked free. Decades later, modern investigators reopened the case. In 2007, a group of police academy students re-examined the evidence using psychological profiling. They reportedly identified a likely suspect, but the name was never released, as the person was already dead and German law prevents naming them. The mystery remained officially unsolved. The farmhouse itself was demolished, as if trying to erase the evil that once lived there. But stories do not die so easily. The Hinterkaifeck murders continue to haunt true crime history because they represent something deeply unsettling. Not just violence, but intimacy. This was not a robbery. Money was left untouched. This was personal. The killer knew the house, knew the routine, knew how to wait, and perhaps most chilling of all, knew how to stay. To this day, when people talk about real-life horror, this case stands as proof that the most terrifying monsters are not ghosts or demons, but human beings who walk among us, unseen, unheard, and never caught. And somewhere, buried beneath the Bavarian soil, the truth still sleeps, waiting for someone to finally uncover who walked out of the forest that night and never walked back.